Good afternoon. The first item of business is Scottish Parliament Corporate Body questions. Before I start, can I say that questions 2 and 5, 3, 9, 10 and 11 are grouped together. Question 1, Jeremy Balfour.
Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body, what its position is on facilitating the Eden Project initiative for Big Lunch in June 2020 to bring people together who work at the Parliament together and help strengthen the sense of community.
Ruth Davison.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I thank the member for that question. The Big Lunch looks like a really worthwhile event with a strong message of community engagement, and I know all members and the SPCB would want to be supportive of such an initiative. As the member will be aware, we have supported a similar event, the Great Get Together, as part of the Joe Cox Foundation in recent years, and as such I would suggest that the Eden Project makes contact with the Scottish Parliament's Events and Exhibitions team to discuss this event in more detail so it can be considered along with other events like the Great Get Together.
Jeremy Balfour.
Can I thank the member for that positive answer? I wonder if you would also consider other community initiatives on the back of a Big Lunch, such as regular exercises or healthy workshops to give all MSPs and parliamentary staff the opportunity to socialise and improve their mental and physical health well-being during the work break times.
Ruth Davison.
These are exactly the sorts of positive suggestions that the SPCB would consider in future, and indeed our events team is designed to help members facilitate and outside organisations facilitate such events in future.
Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Given the current situation around the coronavirus and in the context of this question, the Eden Project initiative and the promotion of other large gatherings of people, what immediate and practical steps will be taken to safeguard building users, for example, a disabling of the fingerprint entry system, and what further steps will be taken should the virus move beyond the containment phase?
Ruth Davison.
Thank you. Officials have been monitoring the spread of the coronavirus over recent weeks and recognise that if a number of cases increases, it may have significant impact on all of us, whether we work at Holyrood or at a local office or whether we're a visitor to this place. At our meeting this morning, the corporate body discussed our approach to pandemic planning and considered the options open to us in limiting exposure to the virus. The corporate body is mindful of its duties and responsibilities to its employees and those who work at the Parliament, including those under the Health and Safety at Work Act. At present, our focus is promoting hand and respiratory hygiene as the main measures in preventing the spread of the virus, and hand sanitizer dispensers have now been placed around the building to help with that. As to the two-factor identification system, while we take steps to mitigate the impact of the coronavirus, it is important that we remain vigilant and not introduce vulnerabilities into our agreed approach to security. The readers used at the entrances carry no more risk of cross-contamination than a door handle, so two-factor authentication will not be suspended. For those with concerns about cross-contamination, hand sanitizer is available at each of the main entrances. On large gatherings, other legislatures, such as the European Parliament, have chosen to stop their engagement activities. And to limit exposure to those that normally work in Holyrood, we may choose to do the same if circumstances warrant that. The corporate body recognises that this would only be done in the most extreme circumstances and would be informed by advice from officials such as the Chief Medical Officer.
Lane Smith, briefly, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Would the SPCB publish detailed guidance, and could we have some more attention to fighting the spread of infection? For example, putting paper towels back into toilets, replenishing soaps quickly, supplying wipes for keyboards, and also situating the hand gels at the public entrance and in the MSP block. And on the issue of fingerprinting, I would like to ask the SPCB to look at that again in terms of infection.
Ruth Davison.
Okay. To reassure the member, the SPCB will continue to monitor the situation in accordance with the teams that we have and the engagement activity that we're doing with other official bodies, including other UK legislatures and the Scottish Government's Resilience Room. In terms of communication with members, we have already communicated on the outbreak and we will continue to do so regularly as the situation develops. Officials are creating an FAQ sheet on how public health advice can be followed, and the aim is to have this advice as applicable to members and their staff as to staff and contractors in Holyrood. We recognise that mitigation steps may need to be increased in the future as risks change or emerge, and if required, we will take steps that are in line with the advice from public health agencies. On the specific issues she raises of hand sanitizer at public entrance, of replacing paper towels, etc., we did have a discussion this morning regarding the work that cleaning crews do, how we can increase what they do as the situation merits it. We will continue to take advice from public health bodies on that.
Question 2, Mary Fee.
To ask the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body what assessment has been made of the level of threat to IT systems from international cyber attacks.
David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body fully recognises that the importance of cyber resilience for all organisations has never been greater. Digital technologies are vital to the successful operation of all modern organisations, and the corporate body have put in place a variety of tools, technologies and procedures to protect the Parliament from a successful attack. Our critical cyber security controls regularly undergo an independent assessment of their effectiveness, earning the Scottish Parliament Cyber Essentials Plus certification, which is revalidated annually. In addition to the technical measures and controls in place, the Scottish Parliament is a member of the Cyber Security Information Sharing Partnership and is in regular contact with the National Cyber Security Centre and other bodies who provide advice on the current threat landscape and cyber security best practice.
Mary Fee.
I'm grateful to Mr Stewart for that very detailed answer. How does the corporate body stay appraised of current cyber security developments?
David Stewart.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Parliament Corporate Body stays appraised of current cybersecurity developments, working with the NCSC and Scottish Government in this regard. We regularly update our technical safeguards while balancing ease of use with security. As mentioned, the Scottish Parliament Corporate Body has recently undertaken an independent assessment of critical cybersecurity controls, leading to the award of Cyber Essentials Plus certification once again.
Question 5, James Kelly.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Corporate Body what recent evidence has been received that its IT systems have been subject to cyber attacks from international sources.
David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body have monitoring systems designed to provide early warning of cyber attacks and their origins. While significant target cyber attacks against the Scottish Parliament are relatively rare, we encounter periodic, smaller-scale attacks. No attacks so far are known to have been successful. The distributed nature of the internet is such that it's not always possible to attribute attacks to particular nation-states, but the origin of some of these attacks is known to be outside the UK. Of course, as network users, we all can share a responsibility to protect the security and cybersecurity of the Scottish Parliament.
James Kelly.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I thank Mr Stewart for the answer. Can I ask if the security budget, the Scottish Corporate Body security budget, is adequate in order to protect systems from these attacks, and whether it has been increased in order to ensure that we keep up to date with IT security developments?
David Stewart.
Presiding Officer, I first of all acknowledge Mr Kelly's expertise in this particular area. The corporate body ensures that the level of protection offered to systems meets or exceeds the baseline standards outlined in the Public Sector Action Plan on Cyber Resilience. The action plan was developed by the National Cyber Resilience Leaders Board and the National Cyber Security Centre, and aims to ensure that Scotland's public bodies have in place a common baseline of good cyber resilience practice, and obviously budgets follow that, Mr Kelly. Our efforts in this area are independently assessed by the Cyber Essentials Plus certification process. The corporate body also recognises that cybersecurity measures must continue to evolve as new threats emerge. As such, there are organisational procedures in place to ensure that we are kept aware of emerging threats and continue to update our systems while balancing the security of our systems with the flexibility that allows members and their staff to work anytime from anywhere. If members such as Mr Kelly have any specific concerns, including the budget, I'm very happy for our cybersecurity expert to meet Mr Kelly and have a more in-depth discussion.
Question 3, Alec Neil.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Scottish Parliament Corporate Body when it will make a decision regarding the level of MSP allowances for staff for 2020-21?
Liam MacArthur.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. And with your indulgence, I'll maybe take a little time in responding to this question in the hope of helping with Mr Neil's question, but those that have been lodged by others. The corporate body met this morning as planned. Amongst other issues, we discussed the annual operating of the staff cost provision. And I can announce that with effect from 1st April, the provision will be operated by 2.96%. There is an important distinction between MSPs and the SPCB when it comes to employment matters. It is the corporate body's responsibility, under the terms of the members' expenses scheme, to operate the staff cost provision, which members then use to employ and pay their staff. The SPCB is not the employer in this relationship, and it is for individual MSPs to budget for their staff salary and cost of living award. The SPCB must update the scheme by the 1st of April each year, having regard to such indices as they consider appropriate. Members will be aware that we have previously used ASH, which is the Index of Annual Survey of Hours and Earnings and is retrospectively based on public sector workers' pay in Scotland. However, members might also be aware that this annual index is showing as 1.4%, which is below the current rate of inflation and what we might expect by way of growth for public sector wages in Scotland. This morning, we agreed that a more appropriate mechanism for this coming year and going forward would be to use the average of ASH and average weekly earnings indices. Both these indices are wage-related and taken together will better reflect wider pay conditions in the public sector. The corporate body agreed that this combined use of indices, which results in a 2.96% uplift to the staff cost provision, was both fair and affordable. I would also like to move on to the wider issue of the overall staff cost provision. The corporate body noted with interest the increase announced yesterday by IPSA, uplifting the staff cost provision for members of the House of Commons by £21,000 per member. At the start of this session, the SPCB increased the overall staff cost provision by £30,000 per member in recognition of the increased powers of this Parliament. As members will be aware, as a matter of good practice, the corporate body has been reviewing the provisions in the current members' expenses scheme ahead of the next session. As part of this review, the SPCB is committed to reviewing the overall staff cost provision. It will do so in the current session with a view to implementing any changes at the start of session 6. And I apologise for the slightly more involved response, but hope that the additional detail and context have been helpful both to Mr Neil, but other colleagues who understandably have an interest in this issue. Thank you.
Yes, and I hope we can have short supplementaries after that full statement. Mr Neil.
Presiding Officer, can I draw the corporate body's attention to the fact that our staff are the worst paid staff and the allowances are the worst of any parliament in the United Kingdom. The 13.9% increase at Westminster now means there's a huge differential between what MPs get and what MSPs get. We owe it to our staff to look after them and make sure they get fair treatment. The Westminster rise is based on what other people get in similar jobs throughout the United Kingdom. Can I ask the corporate body to fundamentally review the situation, because it's unacceptable that our staff continue to be so badly paid compared to other staff doing equivalent jobs in the rest of the country.
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank Alex Neil for his supplementary, and certainly in terms of the sentiment he expresses, I don't think I would at all distance myself from that. It's why at the start of this session, as I said, there was an attempt to uplift the amount available through the staff cost provision to reflect the additional workload on members, but also on their staff. It is a process that we are going through at the moment with a view to putting in place, I think, a system at the start of session 6 which again should reflect the additional workload and the expectations that, as Mr Neil rightly says, we place upon our staff, and we owe a duty of care to them in that regard.
Question 9, Jackie Bailey.
Can I associate myself with Alex Neil's remarks and say that I'm delighted that the corporate body have recognised the unfairness of differential pay rises for staff in the Parliament for this year and welcome the pay up rating of 2.96%. Can I also thank the GMB for their intervention?
No, I'm afraid you have to ask a question.
I'm just about to.
No, you should be asking the question.
In terms of the future review, will the corporate body...
No, the question as is on the paper, please.
Oh, I thought you were dispensing with that when you grouped them.
No.
Oh, fine, okay. It just wastes more time.
There's a chatty way to address me, but I don't know if I
That's
quite
fine.
approve
To
of
ask
it.
the Scottish
Ms
Parliament...
Bailey, start again. We'll wipe the slate clean. Begin.
To ask the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body whether it will uprate member staff cost provision in line with the Scottish Government uprating of 3%.
Briefly, Mr MacArthur.
I don't think there's much I can add to what I've already said in relation to the initial response.
Ms Bailey, your supplementary.
Thank you. I was simply trying to save you time, Presiding Officer, but there you go. Can I thank the GMB for their intervention? And in terms of the future review, will the corporate body ensure there is a comparison with the Welsh Assembly where there is a larger budget for staff despite having fewer powers?
Liam MacArthur.
I think the point that both Mr Neil and Ms Bailey have made in terms of comparisons with other legislatures is one that certainly informs the discussions and the decisions the corporate body takes. I would say that there are differences in terms of the arrangements across the expenses scheme with the Welsh Assembly and what we have here in the Scottish Parliament, but it will certainly feature prominently in the deliberations we have in the run-up to the start of the next session.
Question 10, Bob Doris.
To ask the Scottish Parliament corporate body what steps it is taking to ensure that members can appropriately remunerate their staff.
Liam MacArthur.
Again, I'm not sure there's much I can add to the earlier response.
Bob Doris.
Well, can I put on record, Presiding Officer, that I will have to restructure my office and lose headcount. That means a member of staff, if I am to appropriately pay my staff what they deserve. And on that basis, will the Scottish Parliament corporate body consider a step change and substantially increase staffing budgets in this place, perhaps in line with Westminster, before they decide on any future annual increases in the first place?
Liam MacArthur.
I think, as I said in my earlier response, ultimately the corporate body has a responsibility in terms of operating the staff cost provision and office cost provision in line with indices. It's for individual members to take decisions around the employment of staff, the terms that they are on. So I think in terms of the specific circumstances in Bob Doris's office, I would encourage him to engage in discussions with the HR colleagues if there are specific issues that they may be able to help them with.
Question 11, Daniel Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Parliament corporate body what discussions it has had regarding the increase in MSP staffing budget.
Liam MacArthur.
Again, nothing much more to add to the initial response.
Daniel Johnson.
Associate myself with the previous colleagues' comments. I think the 2.96% increase is of course welcome, but the means by which we have arrived at it is not. Distinctly lacking is a voice of trade unions and staff themselves. Will the corporate body look at having better union and staff representation in future talks and future examination of pay structures in the Parliament?
Liam MacArthur.
I think, as I said earlier, the SPCB is responsible for uprating staff cost provision in line with indices. As I say, we've described the process we went through in setting ASH as an indices. We've moved to one where ASH, AWE, a basket of those indices, is the measure by which future staff cost provision will be uprated. It's for individual members of Parliament to make their own arrangements in terms of the employment of staff.
Daniel, I think that's like Patrick Harvey, I beg your pardon. Briefly, please, Mr Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I echo the general sentiment of the Chamber on this, but I'm also concerned that over the coming weeks and months, we may find that many MSP staff have to go through sick leave or perhaps be in isolation. Can the corporate body assure us that the staff cost provision will be flexible enough to ensure that none of us are in the position of having our staff have to lose pay in order to do that, or have our offices cease to function? And will the same principle apply to corporate body staff and contractor staff as well?
Liam MacArthur.
I thank Patrick Harvey for raising that issue, which did come up during the discussions this morning. I can assure him that this is very much part of the live consideration of what is an evolving situation, but I think we're very cognizant of the fact that either individual members through their own staffing arrangements or indeed other building users may be affected over the coming weeks and months, and we need to be responsive to that, so we will be.
Question 4, Elaine Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body what equality monitoring of staff employed by MSPs it undertakes and what steps it's taking to address any underrepresentation from any section of society.
Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The corporate body does not undertake equality monitoring on behalf of members, as each member is an employer in their own right. The responsibility lies with them to gather data on equalities information on their staff. The SPCB, however, does provide advice and guidance to members to assist them to monitor the diversity of staff within their respective offices. All staff also have the option to add their personal qualities information into the electronic HR system. This is the same management information system that is used for holding their payslips and other personal data. The member can access this information if requested through the Human Resources Office, who can provide a breakdown of the information. This could help the member to review the diversity in their offices if there are any barriers for staff or whether there are groups that are underrepresented.
Elaine Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. MSP staff, especially those working in local offices, are ambassadors for this Parliament, and in many cases they'll be the only point of contact some members of the public will have with the Parliament. So as such, it's vital that MSP staff are representatives of the public that we seek to serve. But I think for this to happen, a targeted recruitment and delivery plan similar to the SPCB's own 2021 plan is required. So I wonder if the SPCB can look further into this issue and publicise the fact that they give advice and guidance on monitoring and good practice for equality issues.
Ruth Davison.
Well, I think it's important not just that the advice and guidance exists, but that members know about it. I think it's also important to say that HR is available to provide that support and guidance to members on promoting best practice and of being an inclusive employer, and that includes providing advice and assistance to members on the recruitment of their staff, including drafting job descriptions and vacancy adverts and placing recruitment adverts to attract candidates from those sorts of diverse backgrounds. There is, I'm told, a range of fact sheets and guidance available to members on their responsibilities under the Equality Act, but I am aware that these have not been updated for some time and hence they are currently under review. So yes, I absolutely take on board from the member that there is work to do in this area, but hopefully that work is being carried out.
Thank you. That concludes questions to the corporate body. I apologise to the four members. I think they'll understand why we had a more extensive list of questions on certain items, and we'll have a pause for a few moments to allow the front benches to take their places.